Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everyone, welcome to my guide for Geb. Geb is the most supportive support who ever supported, and big surprise, you play him in the support role. He's a great guy to go to if you ever just want to play supportive for your team, as he has abilities that aren't brokenly good, but are good every single match for supporting your team. Build-wise, it's much as you'd expect. You want to build tanky and build counter items whenever you can. However, Geb is definitely a god where you can buy 1 or even 2 damage items on him because he is capable of some very serious burst. Relics-wise, Blink is the GOAT on Geb. You'll see why later, but it's pretty much needed every single match. You don't want to buy it first though. For your first relic slot, you typically want something like Shell or Meditation to make sure you get to the laning phase in one piece. Shard-wise, Horn Shard is really the only way to go here. Recipe-wise, it's the same idea. There's no reason to get any recipe other than Sturdy Stew. Let's get to Geb's incredibly complex passive. Geb takes less damage from critical strikes. Yep, that's it. So keep Geb in mind when against crit heavy gods like Jingwei, but don't forget that it works against ability set crit, so Naja and Suket are gods who get affected as well. This is all in the name of trying to make Geb more adequate at soaking up damage for his team, but again it won't be a factor against every team. Some matches and entire metas will go by without crit ever being bought. Let's get to how Geb gets in the enemy's face to soak up that damage by talking about his first ability. Geb slowly gains movement speed over the course of 7 seconds, and is forced to move forward, and cannot slow himself down or strafe side to side. Geb can pass through enemy minions and jungle monsters, but stops on gods, and upon hitting a god, slows and damages them. After 3 seconds, Geb becomes CC immune, and the properties of what happens when you hit a god change. Instead now, Geb will damage for more and knock back the enemy god extremely far, although the direction they are punted is very sensitive to both Geb's angle of movement and the enemy. So that's one way to make a movement ability, probably the most complex and layered movement ability in the game, other than maybe Giannis Portal. Essentially, there's 5 ways to use this ability, and let's talk about each of them in order of most common to least common. Most commonly, you actually just use it for the slow portion. Yeah, it's the least exciting way to use the ability, but depending on the matchup, you actually use this ability close up or at medium range for that slow and a bit of damage. And in situations where you're right in front of the enemy's face, it's actually a pretty significant burst and a good basic attack cancel. So more on that later as we start piecing together his combos. Let's move on to, well, trying to use it as an escape. Spoiler alert, this is Geb's only escape, so you need to be very careful about when you use it, because remember, he's A, not CC immune when the ability starts, and it's not fast to start, and B, he can be body blocked by gods at any point to stop the ability dead in its tracks. When you need to escape, you need to use this ability, but it's best to take stock of your surroundings before committing to the role. What CC does the enemy team still have? Can they just walk right in front of me to body block me? Or can they dash or leap in front of me to go for a block? Because remember, you're not exactly Lightning McQueen when you first start the ability, you're still quite slow, so the fact that Geb can't backstep or strafe during the ability makes him a bit of a sitting duck when it's first starting. So don't get too trigger happy when you're using it for escaping, but don't forget that it's also your only way to escape bad situations, so look for the best opportunity to get rolling, pun absolutely intended. And don't forget that it's just plain good to get around the map with. Mobility like this for a Guardian isn't seen often, so if you really need to get going and get to a fight, you can just roll out from a long distance away and get there more quickly. And remember, you can cancel it at any time to either blink into situations after rolling or just plain begin fighting. But where does that CC immunity and knockback come in? Not often, but absolutely you want to look for it if you can. The flaw here is obvious. You roll forward, get a lot of movement speed, but what, did you start behind the enemy team? Yeah, probably not. So what you typically have to do is roll to the side, either going all the way into the jungle and looping around, or trying your luck rolling straight at them and trying to turn around. And then you can hit them. Yeah, it doesn't sound great, but when it does hit, wow, it is insane. Don't quote me on this, but I'm confident in saying it's the largest knockback in the game, so when you do get this miracle scenario, whoever you hit is almost certainly dead. That's in lane though. Let's talk about in the mid game when you start rotating around the map and such. In this scenario, you can actually start to the side and behind of whoever you're trying to punt, like say the enemy mid laner, but just like while in lane, timing is crucial here. Spend too much time trying to set it up and you'll run out the clock. Be too hasty and you may just straight up miss or not get the knockback portion by the time you hit them. Then finally comes in peeling with this ability, which to be honest comes up even less often. Okay, not really when it comes to just slowing enemies off of a teammate, which yes is something you should be looking to do when peeling for a teammate. Rather I'm talking about rolling up behind a wall or at a long distance to peel for your teammates with a huge knockback portion. This is pretty self-explanatory, but exceptionally hard to time. Geb has another ability which is generally better for defense, but if you're able to set this form of peel up, you always want to go for it if you can, because if you punt any character away from a teammate, they are not going to catch back up to them. Well, okay, some characters can catch back up, but you get what I mean. Most of the time, if you punt an enemy away, your teammate is safe. This is all very reactable, but that's part of the game here. Like Scylla's ultimate reset last time, sure, hitting that Grand Slam combo is great, but sometimes all you need to do to get things going is roll behind an enemy lane opponent, and they have to use a movement ability to avoid it, or use a relic to cleanse the knockback before it hits. So if one of those situations happens where they avoid your knockback but had to expend an important resource to avoid it, don't just walk away in shame. Now's your chance to apply even more pressure, usually with your second ability. Geb roots himself in place and sends out a damaging shockwave with a huge cone in front of himself. But it will have a sort of projectile speed. Not every target in the cone will be knocked up straight away. The closer an enemy god is to Geb, the more damage this ability will do, and man, it does do a lot of damage up close. This is where his first ability, Slow, comes in. Slow with the rollout, then boom, 2 right in their face. And the slow means they take as much damage as possible. That's an important point though, the fact that it has this sort of projectile speed and Geb stands still. So that means this ability has a deceptively shorter range than it may look. So when you have an enemy god at the very end of the ability's range, while chasing or while in lane, if they're running away, they will definitely outrun the shockwave. Or if they're facing you, all they typically need to do is backstep a bit to avoid the ability. Therefore, if your intent is to hit an enemy god, you typically need to be in their face either thanks to your first ability or the relic blink. Not so fast though, as this ability is great for pressuring out enemy laners when you don't use it. Since it can cover the entirety of the minion wave and then some, the enemy team has to walk into the range of this ability to clear the wave. So unless you're laning with a passive ADC, you can instead just hold on to this ability to get into your lane opponent's head a bit, and make them guess whether you're going to use this ability or not, since they don't want to eat that damage and knock up if they don't have to. This works the other way too when you have an aggressive ADC. You can slam the wave, suppressing it for your ADC, to clear more easily and hit the enemy laners all in one go. So while this does take some good judgment as the Geb player, you'll notice pretty quickly when it's best to spam this ability out for pressure or when to hold on to it defensively. Speaking of defensively, as the game gets later, you want to save this ability purely for both combo follow-ups and peel for your teammates. You really don't want to just throw this ability out for some pokes as Geb, since it's his only real way to CC enemies at a reasonable distance. That said, if ranged peel is what you're after, it's hard to beat Geb's third ability. Geb casts his shield on an ally god, and you must have an ally god in the targeter to cast the ability, including himself. So therefore, the ability cannot be missed. The shield has significant health on it, which is great for peeling yourself in case you get caught out. Although, you of course want to focus on using this shield on allies instead. Even more importantly than the health shield is the cleanse on this ability. Yep, when Geb applies the shield, he will cleanse all CC currently affecting the target ally, but of course just like beads, if they're being displaced in the air for instance by a knockup, they will remain in the air for the full duration. But unlike beads, this cannot cleanse any CC that comes after the initial CC cleanse, meaning if your teammates get CC chained, shielding them will only cleanse whatever CC is currently affecting them. Let's look at combos from other gods to show you what I mean. For instance, Hercules 2-1. Hercules knocks up with his 2, then stuns and pushes the target with his first ability. So here, you wouldn't want to shield immediately after they get knocked up, because the important part, the stun and the push, are still coming. So here, you'd want to shield as they're being pushed to cleanse the push as it's affecting them. Remember, if you do it before they get pushed, they'll still be pushed. Then you have for example our Lord and Savior Kuzumbo, who has an ability which silences and pushes enemies, as well as his ultimate which will knock up enemies every half second. So here, you may be inclined just to paste your shield onto any teammate who gets ulted to soak up some damage for them. But Kuzumbo has that insane push ability too, so the same idea as Hercules applies here. You need to wait for teammates to get hit by the real problem CC ability, in this case Kuzumbo's push, to shield them, so you have a better chance of preventing them from getting killed. Luckily though, not every matchup is like this where you have to actually know every god's combos. From things like Ymir freezes to Fenrir ultimate, just shield as soon as your teammate gets hit by the hard CC and you've used the shield in what was likely the best way possible. One thing to keep in mind when facing AoE hard CC like Ymir freeze or Athena taunt, you can't use the shield if you yourself are CC'd, so while you want to be near your carries, give yourself some distance so you don't get caught up in the same CC your teammates are. On that note though, you of course don't only use this ability for hard CC, sometimes you do just need to soak up damage with that shield. Again though, it's all matchup reliant. Same when defending your teammates from someone like Anhur, who has a very strong CC ability and a very damaging ultimate. Generally speaking, it's always best to just cleanse the CC, since almost every god in SMITE confirms their CC before going for any high damaging abilities. Therefore, as a general rule, it's best just to shield your teammates when they get CC'd, not before. But as a whole, shielding someone just so they don't take as much damage otherwise is okay too. But if you really want to get good at Geb, you want to nail reacting to your teammates getting CC'd so you can cleanse for them. Luckily, this is the most difficult thing about Geb to learn. As for his ultimate, it's easy as cake. Geb roots himself in place and becomes CC immune, then after a short windup, damages and stuns all enemies in an area around himself. The damage portion is interesting though, because it does regular base damage, but then also has bonus damage based on the enemy's current health. So that should indicate to you that this is intended as Geb's primary engage tool, that is, the ability you use to start off a fight, so you can deal as much damage as possible to start off a fight. And this is why blink is almost a necessity, so that Geb can simply blink ult to use that ultimate, because you most certainly cannot rely on trying to roll in and then using this ability and expect it to work. Again, as with Geb's second ability, the windup and the fact that Geb roots himself in place gives it a sort of false readout on how far the range actually is. Do it too far away and enemies can legitimately just kind of walk out of the ability if they're already on the edge of it. so when you see a good opportunity to catch multiple enemies with this ability, blink in as deep as you can and ult. That brings up another usage of the ability though, as self-peel or peel for your teammates while you're getting dove. While your shield is the definition of a peel ability, you want to use your ultimate to peel first if you're say in lane and getting ganked by a jungler. This forces the enemy jungler and the enemy laners to burn things like CC immune ultimates, purification beads, and movement abilities to avoid the ultimate. Then you can peel further with your second ability and shield from there. Of course, don't just walk towards enemies while your teammates are getting blasted just to try and ult before shielding. If they need to shield, give them the shield. But it's always best to break up a fight with this ultimate first if you can. So really, there are two modes with this ability, using it to engage on fights or using it to peel for either yourself and or your teammates. It's really as simple as that. And remember, just like with abilities like Ares ult, you should expect this ability to get purification beads from your enemies and have them use movement abilities to get away from your combos. Don't just stand there waiting all day for the absolute optimal time to blink in. Just go in whenever you see an opportunity to use the ultimate on multiple targets, and in that case, it's probably a good use of the ultimate. Speaking of blinking in, some combos with Geb. Roll in close, hit the slow, 2. Roll in from a long distance, cancel the roll, ult, 2. Blink, 2, basic attack, 1. Blink, ult, 2, 1, basic attacks. For ability leveling, you want your 2 at level 1, 3 at level 2, and your 1 at level 3. From there you max your 2, your 3, then your 1, leveling the ultimate whenever you can. Geb has all the tools you need to be a decent support every game, but the problem is, decent can only do so much in a hectic world of SMITE. His tools are good, but definitely slow by today's standards. However, just like Ymir a few gods ago, he has something no other god really has, the instant cleanse from that shield, completely destroying some gods who focus on doing one big CC or damage ability on a single target to participate in fights. Things like Fenrir's ultimate, Anubis' 2, Serket ultimate, Persephone ultimate, or Scylla ultimate. But as time goes on and more gods get added, Geb gets less and less useful, as new supports outrange him and deal damage and CC more quickly, and the combos he tries to prevent with his shield from assassins have more and more moving parts, for instance like Brigitte. You can shield her stun, sure, but she'll just follow it up with her ultimate anyways. That said though, I meant what I said. Geb is genuinely going to have an impact every game, but as a result, go into every game knowing that he was probably not the 100% best choice, as again, unless you're playing him as a hard counter to someone on the enemy team with that shield, there were probably other supports you could have gone who would have been better. Look to Ganesh as a better guardian who's still good every match, but has more answers to what's relevant in the game right now. And for that matter, Umoja and Athena too. Other than countering Fenrir ult though, I mean seriously, 10 years later and Geb still gets to press one button and stops that god from being useful. I love it. So give Geb a look if you're trying to pick up a consistently good god for support, but just know he might not wow you every game in the long term. That's all I have on Geb for now. Thanks for watching.